This video is sort of a combination HVAC diagnosis and repair video, as well as a thank God for his blessing video. So several days ago, I woke up at 3 a.m. I walked out into the hallway of my house and I smelled a burning smell, and I saw smoke in the air. So I immediately started praying, thanking God for waking me up so that I was alerted to whatever was going on. And I asked God to, protect my family, help me figure out, where this smoke is coming from, what's burning, what do I need to do to get it fixed. And the first thing I did was I walked around the house and I looked at all of the things plugged in. Cell phone chargers, for example, sometimes can get very hot. So I checked everything like that, didn't see any problem there. And I noticed that the smoke seemed to be coming from the air conditioner vents very slowly. The thermostat was set to turn the air conditioner on, so the air, should have been blowing out of the vents with some force, but there was no force. There was no air blowing out of the vents, just smoke coming out of the vents. So putting two and two together, I figured that my air handler fan up in the attic, that's where the smoke was coming from, and the fan must not be turning because the air is not blowing out of the vents. So I disconnected the power at my breaker box to my air conditioning system. I have two breakers, and disconnected both of them, and I went up into the attic, and here's what I saw. Now, this video is obviously after the fact. During this, what I would call a crisis, I certainly wasn't worrying about trying to make a video. But so I took the door off of my air handler, and this is the fan housing. So inside of this, big silver container is the fan, and at the bottom there is the motor with a shaft that runs up this way. I looked down from the top and I could see that the fan was not turning, so the motor was not turning. I could hear the motor humming, so I knew that it had, the power that it needed to turn, but it wasn't turning. I also took a quick look at all of these wires and components over here, looking for anything obvious like signs of melted wiring or melted components. I didn't see any big problem there. I'm certainly not an HVAC person. I've never worked on a system like this ever, so didn't really know what all I was looking for. But I do know what a melted wire looks like, and I know what melted plastic looks like, so I was able to look at all those things and determine that there was no obvious signs of damage. I knew my motor wasn't turning, and I saw right here I have a capacitor, and I have had once before on my outside AC unit, my heat pump, I have had the capacitor of that motor to fail before. So I was, that is the extent of my HVAC knowledge. I knew that that capacitor is needed to make the outside motor run. I concluded the same thing would be true of my inside motor. But knowing that motor had overheated to the point of smoking, even if all I needed was that capacitor, I did not feel comfortable putting that burnt motor back in my house and using it. So I decided I would take this whole fan housing, motor and all, down, pull it out of the attic and take a look at it closer. There's a screw right here, and there's a screw right here. That's the only two screws that are holding this whole housing in this air handler. The electrical connection's right here. That's just an electrical connection. You just unplug it, and literally I just slid this housing right out. It was pretty easy. There's a little track on this wall right here, and little metal lips that just slide right in that track, so it pulled out pretty easily. So I brought the whole thing down downstairs, put it on my living room floor, and kind of tidied up the mess I'd made a little bit, and eventually I took the fan housing and assembly out to my garage. So this is the underside of the fan housing. So there's the motor, and the motor is attached to the housing with 4 screws. So I took those 4 screws out, and basically here's what I had left. So that is the motor. That's the bad motor, and I'll show you what I found then. One other thing is, if you'll notice, that white area right there, that is actually a print. I don't know how well that's showing up on the camera, but that's a drawing, a wiring diagram of this system, which is really cool because it, tells me what these wires do and where they go. So I went online and I printed out another copy of that wiring diagram, to have it with me during all of this. And that wiring diagram tells me that my yellow wire is common. This is the motor right here. So that was the part of the diagram that I was most concerned with. So the yellow wire is common. And then the black, red, and blue wire, those are the 3 different speeds that this motor can run. So the black wire says high, that's high speed. The red wire says low, that's low speed. And the blue wire says medium, that's medium speed. So here's how that kind of works. So in your car, if you turn on your air conditioner or your heater, you have a fan selector switch, and that fan selector switch runs different levels of resistance in that circuit. So if you have high resistance, you're going to have a low fan speed. If you have low resistance, you're going to have a high fan speed. So your selector knob is just running those different selections through different levels of resistance to control the speed that your air is blowing. So apparently that's the same principle this motor works on. So I got my multimeter, and you can measure resistance. It's the little upside down horseshoe reading right there. So I took the connector, and using my wiring diagram, yellow is common, so I'm going to use the yellow wire for all of these measurements. And I wanted to check the black wire was the high speed. The highest speed should have the lowest resistance, because you don't really want resistance, you want full blast, high speed air. So touching on that pin, I have a resistance of 33.34. It's kind of fluttering around, but actually it's fluttering a lot, probably because I'm moving, but that's okay. So right now it's a resistance of 31. So that's my high speed. If I look at my medium speed, that's my blue. Well, now I should have a little bit more resistance because I'm slowing that fan down a little bit. So now I've got 34.6 ohms of resistance. And if I check my red wire, it is the low speed, so it should have the most resistance of all. Now, I will tell you, the day that this happened, when I checked that red wire the same way I'm doing this, it was showing OL. Same reading this on the screen there. I had this probe pressed into that pin, touching that wiring connector, and I was showing OL. That was telling me that my reading was out of limit. In other words, there's no continuity here. There's a broken wire somewhere in this circuit. So that told me that this red wire, where it runs into the motor, the coil winding, something in there was broken and not making a connection. However, a few days later, I kept kind of playing with this, and I checked it again. Let's see what happens now. So now I'm checking that circuit, and I'm actually getting 9 kilo ohms. So I am actually getting some reading, other than OL, but still that that told me that this circuit, something's wrong with this circuit. It's not like the others. It's way different than the rest of them. Anyway, long story short, I felt very confident that this is not a motor I want to put back in my house. The other thing is the capacitor. So this capacitor says it's a 15 microfarad, and this being a capacitor, well, I have right here a capacitor setting on my multimeter, so I can measure that. So to determine if this capacitor is good or bad, I'm just going to probe this one side here. It doesn't matter if you put the red on one side and black on the other or reverse them. I just want to read what is the reading. I'm expecting 15 would be good, and I'm getting 12.85. So that's low. This should be a 15 microfarad capacitor, and I'm getting 12.85. Now, if that's picking up in the camera, you can see that this is 15 microfarads plus or minus 5%. So 5% lower than 15 would be 14 something, 14 and a quarter or so. So this thing could read as low as 14 something. I was reading, what was that, 12. So I know for a fact that I have a bad capacitor. I highly suspect I have a bad motor, and even if I don't have a bad motor, I'm not going to put the motor back in my house that got so hot that it was smoking. So anyway, I ordered the motor, ordered the capacitor. The capacitor was 10 bucks on Amazon. It came within 2 days. Unfortunately, the motor, I had a hard time finding the exact right motor that I needed, and I had to order it from eBay, and it took about 4 days to get here. So my family had some pretty hot, uncomfortable nights for 4 nights, sleeping with a lot of fans blowing. But it came. Everything came. I put it all back together just like it was, and it works beautifully. So again, if this is encouraging or helps anyone, just wanted to say that I have basically zero HVAC experience. You know, I'm not experienced with this kind of stuff. But first thing I did when this problem arose was I prayed and I asked God to help me. I thanked God for waking me up and saving my family from, you know, burning up in a fire. And I use what I saw. I used the wiring diagram. I used the fact that I know what a melted wire looks like, and I know what melted plastic looks like, and you know, I am a little bit experienced with using my multimeter. So putting all that together, no service technician was called. I don't know exactly what this whole repair would have cost. I'm assuming it would have been very expensive. So that's it. You know, thank God for his blessings, and we are back in business with cold air and no smoke.